This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
Joe Walsh, former Congressman Joe Walsh with you. This is White Flag with Joe Walsh. Every week I sit down with someone who I respectfully disagree with about topics big and small, important and not so important. I'm excited to have this conversation with Quin Hillyer, who has been, as he's described, a true blue movement conservative forever, easily 50-some years. He's the deputy commentary editor at the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. He puts out pieces. He edits a lot of pieces there. Quin is a principled conservative. I'm not going to. Do you describe yourself as a NeverTrumper?
Yes, I was an original NeverTrumper.
From the beginning.
Very, very active in the 2016 NeverTrump efforts.
So you know me, wayward Tea Party congressman. It took me a little bit to get there. Quin, when you first saw Trump come on the scene in 15 or whatever, your first gut reaction was what?
I thought it was a joke. But then within 5 weeks, all of a sudden, I realized that it was not a joke. I realized that it was a danger. I realized that he actually did have staying power and that he should not have staying power because he was absolutely god-awful. And so it took me about 5 weeks, but about 5 weeks after he came down that escalator, I became NeverTrump and started writing in every location that I could, sending columns out all over the country, trying to block him. Obviously, to no avail.
But, and I'm sure others have said this, I thank you for all of that. I appreciate the NeverTrumpers from the beginning. As you know, I was not a NeverTrumper from the beginning. When Trump came down that escalator, I was a Tea Party popular, culture war warrior on the radio all over the country. And Quin, I never thought it was a joke, only because, like the people who would call into my radio show, the base, they loved it. The Republican establishment laughed at this thing, but I knew right away that he was tapping into something. You kind of knew that too, even if you and I didn't like what he was tapping into.
It took 5 weeks, but once I saw for about 5 weeks, then a light went on in my head, and I realized he was tapping into something, and that's why I got so concerned, because at the same time he was tapping into something, I thought that he was tapping into something that was not good.
You and I are going to discuss one of my favorite questions right now, which is, for those of us who are principled conservative NeverTrumpers, and we could never vote for Trump because we believe he's unfit, well, then, damn it, you have to vote for Biden. We're going to get into that in just a second, because I love that topic, Quin, and I so want to hear your view. From the moment I publicly came out against Trump about 6 years ago, it seems like I had my silly, crazy primary challenge against him in 20. I've publicly apologized for everything Tea Party people like me did to help rile up the base to lead to Trump. Who do you blame? And I accept a lot of that blame. Who do you blame for the rise of Trump? Why did he so easily take over the party?
Boy, there's so much blame to go around. I don't know where to start. Look, I am never Trump, but nobody can ever say that I've been Republican establishment. I was firmly Reaganite and fighting against the DC establishment for decades. I was certainly not a fan of Papa Bush, and I don't think there's been a single Republican nominee that was my first choice at the start of that cycle since Reagan.
Yeah.
So I'm not establishment, but so something.
Quinn, I'm going to interrupt only in that I appreciate that. That's a really important distinction you're making. Quin Hillyer is not Republican Party establishment. Joe Walsh clearly was not Republican Party establishment. That's a really important point. Continue.
Okay, well, thank you. So to those who, I mean, now they throw around the word establishment, so many people do, and it makes almost no sense. Actually, Trump is the establishment now. He completely controls the party. But there's definitely some blame to go to the old establishment that absolutely would not listen to the grassroots. And boom. Okay. On the other hand, when the Tea Party got in, they would not accept, and you were in
right
the Congresses then, would not accept victories. I mean, John Boehner, who was actually not my favorite, but John Boehner
good guy,
negotiated one of the best budget deals that conservatives have ever achieved, and he got absolutely trashed for it on the right.
We killed him for it. Yeah.
So when the old establishment is telling grassroots, stay in your place, but then when the Tea Party types, not all of them, but some of them, are riling them up and telling them they should still be angry even when the Republican Party is actually delivering, you have a toxic combination. And then when you put all that into the Obama comes in and for 8 years moves things so far to the left, and the nanny state gets ever more intrusive, people are really angry, and all they're told is extreme stuff and anger, things to be angry about, and nothing about what is good and what can be achieved and how the system actually still does work. Nobody out there, or very few people, think the system works, but it actually could if people would stop yelling.
So I very simply say that Tea Party people like me inflamed the base. The establishment dismissed and ignored the base, thereby creating a fertile soil for a demagogue like Trump to come along. Does that make sense?
You just said it much more concisely than I did.
No, but your business is to put it down on paper. Yeah, it was that combination, I thought.
It definitely was. And I had seen some of the send a message and sort of have a fit kind of thing 30 years ago, now 35 years ago, in Louisiana when I was fairly soon out of college, when you had the rise of neo-Nazi David Duke, who, by the way, I spent 3 full years fighting against.
Gee, thank you.
And that's where people nationally first noticed me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that Trump is a neo-Nazi. I'm not saying that. I'm saying the shoot your finger at the establishment anger from a lot of grassroots and a lot of sort of forgotten Americans is the same. It's the let's see what we can do to shake things up and tell people that we're not happy. And a lot of that sentiment grabbed onto David Duke in the same way and for the same reasons that it has grabbed on to Trump, not for the neo-Nazi Ku Klux Klan stuff, but just the idea that we're going to find whatever vehicle we can to express our anger and to say we want something different.
Before we're going to get to our question here in a sec, I want to get your thought on one more point to this, and then we'll end this. as a Tea Party guy, as somebody who rode that wave, I've always said there were two strands to the Tea Party. One was the spending, we're bankrupting future generations, and then you had some of this cultural stuff. I always felt, Quinn, that when we went to Washington, and I'm glad you slapped me up, we should have accepted a win or two, but I never felt like we delivered on the spending stuff. And then the base then began to turn to some of this cultural stuff, which Trump tapped into. React to that.
Well, I think actually you did deliver on the spending stuff. It wasn't anywhere near what I would want. Look, I spent 5 years on the Appropriations Committee when we actually cut actual dollars, not just the rise of increase, the rate of increase.
Yeah.
That was in the Gingrich years. So it wasn't that kind of an achievement, but Obama had spent the first 3 years spending like a madman.
Yeah.
And Boehner actually got real, honest to goodness limits on that, and it reined Obama in.
And he was in, by the way, Quinn, he was in a tough spot that I didn't appreciate at the time. He had Harry Reid in the Senate, right? So you're right. Boehner was in a tough spot.
Yeah. And again, I was around Boehner when he first got elected. I was working in Congress, and he's not my favorite, but he actually delivered. The cultural stuff got worse and worse and worse, and now it's just crazy, which is one reason why, by the way, that I think a lot of NeverTrumpers are too unworried about Biden, because domestically the Biden administration has gone so crazy left on a lot of these cultural issues with the weight of government behind it that it's pretty scary. Okay,
so let's take that, my friend, and let's lead into our topic at hand, where I think you and I disagree. And correct me if I'm wrong. My general thesis is this, and I scream it often on Twitter and TV. I, Joe Walsh, believe Donald Trump is unfit to be president. I know you feel the same way. If you believe Donald Trump is unfit to be president, A, and B, we know only one of two people is going to be elected in November, either the Republican nominee or the Democratic nominee. That's it. Well, if you believe Trump is unfit to be president, you then are obligated to vote for the only person who can keep Trump out of the White House, and that's the Democratic nominee, likely Biden. And to not do so is inconsistent, wrong, and cowardly. And I shrieked that from the mountaintops, and you shrieked back at me and said, Joe, no. Disagree with me. Jump us off.
Easy. If you think that Trump is unfit to be president, but you also think Kamala Harris is unfit to be president, then you cannot support either one.
Okay, stop. That's interesting. And by the way, my friend, that's a great curveball that I had not anticipated, but I appreciate that. So you do believe Trump is unfit, correct, to be president?
Absolutely 100% unfit.
So then, okay, that's an interesting objection. I then can't vote for Biden, Quinn says, because you believe Kamala's unfit.
And I think that by now Biden is unfit too, and he was never, at best, he was barely acceptable. But
then let's back up. Why is Trump unfit? I want to examine then why you think Kamala Harris and or Joe Biden's unfit. We agree Trump's unfit. To me, he's a threat to democracy. You summarize your unfitness for him.
Trump is a threat to democracy. He wants to be an autocrat. He is of horrendous character. He is thoroughly corrupt. He's got psychological problems. He's unstable, and he probably would have caused us horrendous damage if he hadn't had some good people around him in the first term to very, very much at the last minute several times bring him from the brink of disaster.
Perfectly put, perfectly stated. I would only add, and I would just add to what you said, Trump is an autocrat wannabe. I believe he has no... I believe he would destroy our democracy if he could, and I believe he believes he's above the law. Thereby, he's unfit. That's easy. Start with Biden. Like, Quinn, my take on Biden is I disagree with him on almost all public policy, but I don't think he would try to destroy our democracy, and I don't think he's above the law. He believes he's above the law. Why do you think Biden's unfit?
Well, Biden.
Or can I back up for 1 sec,
Yeah.
Quinn? If you didn't believe Biden and or Kamala Harris were unfit, would you still feel the same way that you couldn't vote for Biden?
No. If I thought that they were at least within the outer bounds of reasonably fit, I would vote. Again, I'll go back to Louisiana, 1991, runoff between neo-Nazi David Duke, who was pretending not to be a neo-Nazi, and longtime former governor Edwin Edwards, who was crooked and way liberal, and people like me and my father had spent 20 years fighting against him, but Edwards was not going to destroy democracy. And so even though we'd spent 20 years fighting against Edwin Edwards, I and my father were extremely openly urging people to vote for Edwards. If I felt the same way about Biden, I would do the same thing.
So
I would say I cannot stand the guy, but at least he and his running mate are fit.
So then
in this
educate
case, I don't
me.
think that
Enlighten
applies.
Enlighten me, my friend. Let's start with Biden. Why do you think Biden's unfit to be president?
Well, because he started off as barely fit. And that, you go back to his whole career where he has been, with occasional flashes of the good Biden, he has been a fraud. I mean, this is the guy who got laughed out of the 1988 presidential race.
Plagiarism.
By one lie and one bit of plagiarism after another. This is a guy who lied to Clarence Thomas about what was going to happen in the Clarence Thomas hearings. This is and has been at the forefront of one of the biggest things that destroyed the Senate as an institution, which is starting the judicial wars, and not just starting it, but running them on an extremely unfair, underhanded manner. And then, even apart from his, getting way too old and having lost a step, he has governed from the far left. And it's not so much on foreign policy, although I don't like that either, but his administration on the domestic level, again and again and again, has pushed some of the most extreme, objectionable policies with the force of government behind them that I have ever seen. Stuff that even 20 years ago nobody would have ever dreamed of. And then on top of that, what he has done at the border. And I'm only a semi-restrictionist at the border, but even I am just absolutely appalled. So Biden alone has become close to unfit. And then you throw on top of it his obvious declining mental and physical acuity, and I think that means that he might not be up for a challenge. If there's a crisis, I don't think he could lead it, and that makes things very, very scary.
So I appreciate the way you spelled all that out. Let me push back on some of it, and then you respond. Biden has always, and I say this to a lot of people who forget, you don't, obviously, Biden's always had issues with the truth, right? Going way back. All politicians fudge, hedge, and lie. When you look at the grand scheme of things, Biden's always had more problems with the truth than most politicians. Trump has taken that and then, Trump lies as he breathes. But I consider, like Biden has had issues with the truth, but like I find that with plenty of politicians historically. So even though I don't like that, I don't know that I find him unfit for that. If you feel like he's governing from the far left, and even if I thought he was, again, I'd have real policy problems with that, but I wouldn't call that unfit. I've got a big problem with what he's done at the border. But again, I don't call that unfit. That's a policy difference. I think the only area where I'd say he's unfit is if he were too old and he just mentally was absolutely incapable. And I don't know that we've seen that yet. So, Quinn, a lot of what you spell out is every politician lies, and you've got problems with a lot of his policy. But that doesn't mean he's unfit.
Well, there's a difference between, there's policies as in how much do you spend? Whether you slightly increase appropriations more than the other guy. Where there's policy as to, you're more or less pro-union.
Yeah.
Those are ordinary policy differences. I'm saying the differences have become so great in both kind and degree, especially domestically. The absolute authoritarianism of the Biden administrative agencies has been such that it just astonishes me. You literally have the Biden administration siding with schools that say we refuse to tell parents what's going on with their children. You have the Biden administration siding with agencies that say faith-based adoption agencies that have been there for 150 years can no longer be accredited if they actually apply their faith. You have example after example. You have the Biden administration coming down and trying to crack down on parents who say they do not want their children in third grade to have access to what is absolutely explicit pornography. You have, and then on top of that, you have back on Biden's fitness, his mental acuity. What we saw in Afghanistan was the absolute worst fumble, worst abandonment, the worst embarrassment of foreign policy, I think, in American history.
Oh, wow. That's interesting, Quinn. That's interesting. To the first bag of stuff there, I agree with everything you just said. But again, to me, that's governing from the far left. And I have
it's authoritarian, though. Let me interrupt.
But go ahead. Continue.
When you have government literally siding against parents and literally saying that parents are wrong to object, I'm not talking about, I'm actually fairly tolerant when it comes to, some social issues. But when you literally say that parents are wrong to object to their children having access to flat out pornography, and that the parents can be cracked down on for that, that's obscene, and that's authoritarian.
Agreed, it's obscene. And even if I said, and that's authoritarian, that's a policy.
No, it's not. But it's not just.
Well, no, but it's Quinn. It's a policy backed up by government. It's government enacting a policy. It's like which I find abhorrent and I disagree with. But that's a policy backed up by government. He's the president. This is his policy. It would be like, I can't stand Ron DeSantis. Cannot stand. And I couldn't have supported DeSantis if he were the nominee. Because to me, DeSantis exhibits a lot of authoritarianism on the right, telling private companies what they can do, telling teachers what they can say. But I would not call Ron DeSantis unfit to be president if he became president. I would just say he's exhibiting a lot of problematic authoritarian shit from the right, but I wouldn't say he's unfit. Does that make sense?
And again, when it comes down to it, the problems with Trump are also policy. It's how he would use government to crack down on people that he doesn't like or that he disagrees with. And again, the level of administrative abuse under Biden is such that I think it's authoritarian. And then you have Afghanistan, and then you have Biden being, I think so doddering that if there were a crisis, I think he could not be trusted to handle the crisis, and it could be an existential threat. And meanwhile, I think he has created a nearly existential threat on the border because he's letting in probably ISIS representatives. We know he's letting in people on the terrorist watch list. We know he's letting in criminals, and then even after they get arrested, they get released. This is stuff that is of such degree that I think it is a threat, even if you assume that he will get no worse mentally and physically over the next 4 years. But I think he will, in which case you get to President Kamala Harris.
Well, and Quinn, I can't argue with that. We all get worse over time. So I can't argue with that. I just keep coming back to this, and I hear everything you're saying. I don't consider Trump to be unfit because of some of the goofy authoritarian shit he'd like to do. I consider Trump to be unfit because he tried to overthrow an American election. He quite literally believes he's above the law. So I think he's incapable of enforcing the Constitution. To me, it has nothing to do with any policies Trump might want to enact. And I think that's where you and I disagree on this first part of Biden being unfit. What's interesting is your Afghanistan thing, and go ahead and fire at me. Like, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years too long. I really appreciate the fact that Biden just got us the hell out. I always thought it was going to be messy when we got out, but I give him a lot of props. I've never understood why people so rip him for the way it happened, but respond to that, my friend.
Well, you can do it in an orderly fashion, or you can do it in a cluster F, and he did a cluster F, and he had plenty of time to do otherwise. He did not even let the Afghanistan government know that we were pulling out when we pulled out. He gave up the Bagram Air Force Base, which, by the way, my understanding is it is one of the finest military facilities in the world, and he gave that up first instead of protecting it last. And in giving that, we should have kept that regardless, and certainly should have not abandoned all the military equipment that we abandoned there, all the intelligence that we abandoned there. Mm-hmm. Then we made absolutely no provision to get out American personnel, including American non-military citizens. It was one of the biggest, in fact, I think probably the single biggest embarrassment, even worse than the bug out from Vietnam. And it could have been managed much better. And frankly, he was told, the Afghanistan study group, the official body that was supposed to study this, recommended that he keep a reserve force of, it was either between 2,500 and 5,000 troops there at Bagram, basically for the foreseeable future. And they made a very good argument as to why, and he completely ignored it.
I clearly disagree with a lot of what you've said about that, but even when it comes to Afghanistan, but even with that, Quinn, to me, everything you've laid out about Biden is, and I respect it because I'm with you on this policy, it's vehement opposition to what Joe Biden wants to do. And obviously he's president, so he can use his government to try to do it. That happens with whoever is president. To me, the only aspect of him where you could hang your hat and say, this guy is unfit, is if mentally he's just not there and he's incapable of doing his job. Do you think he's there?
I think he's close to there, and I use Afghanistan as an example. I think he was more mentally fit 2.5 years ago than he is now, and more physically fit. I don't think he's senile, but I think he has lost not just a few miles off his fastball. He's lost 30 miles per hour off his fastball. If you look at how badly he handled Afghanistan when he did have 8 months to plan or 7 months to plan, and then you look at his deterioration since, and then you think about what if there were an actual crisis that blew up in 3 days instead of 7.5 months plus the 20 years before that of looking at the policy. I think he could not handle that, and it could be an existential threat because he's already that incompetent. He's already, as Robert Gates, the defense secretary, said long ago, he's never been right on any foreign policy issue in his life. So his instincts are already wrong. His capabilities, as shown in Afghanistan, were already bad. And now I think he's absolutely incapable of handling a real crisis.
If you feel that way, if you believe he now is incapable of doing his job, that's basically what you're saying, right? He's too old. He just doesn't have enough up here anymore to do his job.
No, I'm saying mentally and physically. I mean, you can still sort of be able to reason, but not reason as fast and get tired really fast. If you have the missiles of October, like JFK faced, and you've got to be going around the clock for eight or 9 days, I don't think he's up to it.
So that's what I'm saying. So you think he's crossed that point where he's up to handling the rigors of the job and any sort of crisis beyond just the normal day-to-day rigor?
Yes, I think he's still up for handling the basic day-to-day when he works 5 hours a day and takes a lot of naps and goes on more vacations than any president in history, including Trump and Obama. But he can still handle the day-to-day. I do not think he can handle a crisis, and I think we're facing several potential crises.
You don't believe that when a president leaves the White House, he's on vacation, though, right? I mean,
No,
the office follows a president everywhere.
I mean, people have done a study of these numbers, and he's taken more vacation.
Yeah, but what's a vacation, Quinn? When he goes to Delaware or he hangs out on the beach at his beach house, I mean, he's still got...
Yeah, he's still in touch, but he's not there actively doing what you do when you're in the White House all the time. And he's held fewer press conferences. He has... every single metric that you use shows that he is taking more time off and is not as available than any other president. I mean, except for Woodrow Wilson after he had a stroke.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I'd say I'd quibble with. I would just say I'd argue with he's taking more time off. I think he spends a lot of time out of the White House. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that because the president does his job wherever he is. But I will say, Quinn, to kind of put a wrap on this, that would, if you felt that he's crossed the point, and if you don't believe he could handle a major crisis,
I don't.
Then yes, then in your mind he's no longer fit. I get that. I don't know enough to know that. You probably have better sources than I do. People who are with him in private, good, bad, and whatever, mainly say, he's generally on top of his game in private. You've heard that, right?
I've heard that, but you can see what he does in public. You can see how he mangled Afghanistan. You can see...
For the record, I don't think he mangled Afghanistan, but continue.
And again, if I keep saying, if you believe he mangled Afghanistan as badly as I think he did, and if you think he's worse now than he was then, and if you think that Afghanistan is not even the kind of crisis that I'm talking about, then you think he's not fit. And then if something happens to him, I mean, this is a guy, remember, who in 1988 had 2 aneurysms in his brain. So he's lucky to be alive even now. He barely survived in 1988, 35 plus years ago. And if something happens to him now, you get Kamala Harris, and I think she is both incompetent and so far left that she makes Obama
Okay.
moderate.
Okay. Before we get to Kamala, let's backtrack for a second. Let's see if we can summarize our disagreement. And I'm gonna speak for you. So correct me if I'm wrong. If you believed Joe Biden was fit to be president, would you vote for Biden? Biden Trump. If you believed everything. Forget about everything you just said. You believe he's unfit. If you believed he was fit, then would you vote for him? As you did Edwards in Louisiana all those years?
Maybe if he changed his vice president.
Okay. All right. Hold that thought. Do you agree with me, Quinn, in general, that yourself aside, if you're one of us NeverTrumpers and you believe Trump's unfit, and you believe Biden is fit, but you
barely.
just have...
Even if you say, because that's the closest I could get to fit would be barely.
No, right. And I'm taking you out of the equation. Let's imagine there's one of our other NeverTrumper pals who believes Trump's unfit. They believe Biden's fit. They just have a problem with everything he does, his policy. Would you believe that NeverTrumper, if you believe Trump's unfit and Biden is fit, should vote for Biden?
Only if Biden changed his vice
VP.
president, because Biden at 81 years old, and clearly, even if you think he's up for the rigors of the job, but there's just the normal actuarial tables. The chances of him becoming incapacitated are so much greater than any other president in history. Then you have a close to 50-50 chance that you're getting Kamala Harris as president, and I think she is very, very scary.
Okay, my friend. So let me whack you upside the head, and then you can whack me back. Kamala Harris, and even if I agreed with you, she's incompetent, she's far left, she's whatever. Again, she would not try to overthrow our democracy. She doesn't believe she's above the law. If she lost, okay, let me finish and then jump on me. If she lost an election, she'd participate in the peaceful transfer of power. She may be far left, but I don't know in God's name how you could say like she's unfit. So explain thyself.
Okay, when you're as far left as she is, then you are a threat to democracy. There's a distinction between old-fashioned...
Really? Go ahead.
What? There's a distinction between old-fashioned liberals and hard left. And hard left does not believe... The hard left is from the whole, I mean, even further left than Woodrow Wilson, but started with the progressive movement, literally wanted to trash the Constitution back more than 100 years ago. They do not believe in the Constitution. I do not believe she believes in the Constitution. I do not think she believes that government should be restrained.
You don't think Kamala Harris believes in the United States Constitution?
Absolutely not. I do not.
Wow. Okay.
And I would urge anybody to go back and read some of the stuff that Dan McLaughlin at National Review, who did a deep dive into Kamala Harris, things that he wrote about Kamala Harris back in 2020. And to me, what he presented, and Dan is a very thoughtful, knowledgeable, non-Trump, responsible
Yeah,
commentator.
you know what he does though, Dan, and I don't, Quinn. You don't do this, but Dan McLaughlin and a number of these guys do the both sides bullshit. Like Trump's bad, but Biden's really bad, so I don't know what I'm going to do. And it seems to me it's a way to evade having to vote for Trump. Just like there are so many people in our movement, Quinn, who hate Trump, but they don't want to talk about it, so they always go after the left because they don't want to have to. If you're out there and you say you're a NeverTrumper, NeverTrumper, NeverTrumper in our business, it's harder to make a living. He strikes me as one of those. So they always fall back. Oh, they're both bad. So
what if it's not falling back? What if it's actually believing what he says? What if it's actually believing what I say? That there are degrees of liberalism, and then there is hard leftism, which is of such a degree that it is a threat to democracy. I think she is.
Is there I know she's just been vice president. She was a senator. What's one piece of hard evidence? Like, she raised her hand to swear, uphold and defend the Constitution. You don't think she would?
No, I don't. And Donald Trump raised his hand to defend the Constitution, and then just 2 months ago, he filed a brief in court that said that oath did not actually mean that he has to, quote, support the Constitution.
Well, that's Trump. That's Trump. Yeah.
Yes. So, just having sworn that oath doesn't mean anything. You look at some of the interviews she did during the during the post George Floyd stuff. Mm-hmm. You look at the radical pro-rioter statements that she made, the radical anti-police statements that she made, the advocacy of no bail, there was some statement where she said, and we're not just going to stop now. This was back in June of 2020. She said, December, you wait. We're still coming at you, and we're coming at you even stronger. And it was this sort of Chicago 7 kind of radicalism.
But she's a politician, and you're talking about speeches she gives and things she says. But I just, Quinn, this is so fascinating to me. And I love this conversation because I think even Kamala Harris, there's everybody kind of fits generally on a spectrum, far left, far right. But we're Americans. We'll respect the Constitution. If we lose, the other guy wins. We're not going to try to overthrow an election. We're not going to try to, shut down Fox News or MSNBC. Most politicians fall somewhere in there. I think they all generally do. And then there's Trump, who's way outside of those boundaries.
You think that Trump is way outside?
Oh, completely.
That the others aren't, and I'm not going to jump in and say, he's an ordinary liberal, but he's way outside. No, I mean, I would vote for Mitch Landrieu over Trump. I would vote for Andy Beshear over Trump. I would vote for Mark Warner over Trump. There are a lot of Democrats I would vote for over Trump.
Would you vote for those are all good centrist Democrats. Would you vote for a progressive over Trump?
Look,
would you vote for Bernie Sanders over Trump?
What?
Bernie Sanders over Trump?
Never.
Elizabeth Warren over Trump?
No.
Do you consider Elizabeth Warren to be unfit to be president?
In the way that you're using it, maybe no, but again.
But in the way you'd define it.
I don't know unfit, but I think what she would do would be almost as bad on the other side. But again, everything you're saying, and this is the main thing we haven't talked about yet, everything you're saying is making the assumption that there are only two choices. And I don't make that assumption. I reject that assumption wholeheartedly.
Okay, stop there. And so that let's move to that before we finish. I think on the first part of this, I don't consider Biden to be unfit. You do. I respect that. I don't consider Kamala to be unfit, even if she's far left and incompetent. Like I don't consider Bernie or Elizabeth Warren to be unfit, even though I consider them to be far left. But you do, or you could, and we respectfully disagree on that. So let's move to what you just said. It's Trump. Let's assume Trump versus Biden, and there'll be an independent, and you got RFK Jr., some other candidates there. You do agree with me, though, that the next president is either going to be the Republican or the Democratic nominee, correct?
Yes. There have been three, and with all due respect, there have been three major efforts to run as an independent or third party. All three of them actually came close to achieving their goals. Teddy Roosevelt ran ahead of the Republican nominee, got more votes and more electoral votes. And if he had been able, he was running as a progressive, but the Democrats stayed firm. If he had been able to peel off only another, say, 500,000 to 800,000 Democrats, he might have actually won.
Yeah.
You go to 1968 when George Wallace was running. It was mostly a niche one-issue campaign, although attitudinally it was very Trumpy. Because attitudinally it was all against the pointy-headed bureaucrats and all this kind of stuff. But even in effect running a one-issue nasty campaign, he won 5 states. It turned out that did not send it into the House of Representatives,
right?
But it very well could have. I mean, the race in terms of number of votes between the two major candidates was within like 1 million votes. So that could have achieved his aims. Ross Perot, the last major one.
19% of the vote?
What?
19% of the vote? Yeah.
But even better. Everybody says, oh, well, they say even Ross Perot didn't win. Ross Perot torpedoed himself. In June of that year, he was leading. He was at 38%. Bush was at 31%, and Clinton was at 22%. I just looked it up again. 38, 31, 22. He was leading. And then the numbskull dropped out of the race for 2 months.
Yeah, I remember that.
He dropped out of the race for 2 months. And then when he got back in, after basically indicating he wasn't really serious because he got out of the race, he got back in. They say, why'd you get out? And he started this crackpot stuff about how Bush and the CIA had messed with his daughter's wedding. And he sounded like an absolute lunatic. And he still got 19% of the vote. Now, what if a Ross Perot gets in and takes the lead? And once he takes the lead, people fire shots at him. He's going to come back down a little bit. But basically, if he stays as a normal, sane candidate and keeps campaigning for the next 5 months and doesn't start talking about his daughter's wedding, that is a 33-33-33 race, and almost anybody can win. The permutations are countless.
Okay, you've convinced me. That's why I love these conversations. An attractive, appealing, independent with a lot of resources, even coming in next week, because this is such an unusual race between two people America doesn't want, could make it interesting and maybe could win. But that's not. I don't think that's going to happen. Do you? Right now, we've got RFK Jr. and a couple far left candidates, Cornel West and.
I think it could happen. And to finish the Perot thing, there were fewer self-identified independents in 92 than there are now.
Yeah.
Okay. And neither Bush nor Clinton was as hated as Biden and Trump are hated now. You never had a poll that came even close to saying 67% of the public were not happy with the two choices. So the ground is more fertile now than it was under Perot.
So who? So who,
to answer
Quinn?
your
Who would it
question, if there weren't sore loser laws that keep Nikki Haley off the ballot, Nikki Haley might be able to do it. I think a Condi Rice might be able to do it. I think a Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana or a Senator Young of Indiana could make a good enough entrance. You look at Cassidy. Cassidy has a very appealing background. The man was a doctor. He went and he
great guy. I served with him. I love him. Great guy.
He's a great guy, and he has integrity. And he went and he served in Africa, treating people with malaria, basically on a mission. He's got a very appealing background.
Except nobody knows who he is. He'd have to have a shitload of gazillions behind him.
Anybody that gets in that is of the level of a senator or governor, if they get in and make a good enough first impression, especially in this atmosphere where people are freaked out about both Trump and Biden, he would have at least as much of a chance. Very few Americans knew who Ross Perot was in, say, October of 1991. And 5 months later, he jumped in and he went to the top of the polls.
Right, and he had money and he put money into it. I've always liked Cassidy. I served with him, great guy. He's not the most dynamic guy, so he'd have to have money behind him. But Quinn, answer this. I don't see that happening. But from my perspective, there's no way Trump can get reelected. I could live with another 4 years of Biden. There's no way. And so you put I want every voter to have to choose between Trump, Biden. That's it.
I think the American people deserve to have a better choice than Trump and Kamala Harris.
So respond to this, my conservative historian. Bullshit. The American people get what they deserve.
No, what they deserve, if somebody puts a good independent candidate, then they deserve to have an option. They're not getting what they deserve now. They're getting what a very a whole lot of odd circumstances have developed to make this, to create a system where we've got these two losers that are now going to be the nominees. But that doesn't mean that that anywhere near half or even 40% of the country actually wants that person. If no more than 40% of the country actually wants that person, then the country does not deserve that person without having been given at least another option.
Well, maybe you and I agree on this. I think we're paralyzed with Biden Trump. I think that's what we're going to be paralyzed with the next 8 to 9 months. I think after this election, I think there's going to be a bunch of reform and I think the two-party system is broken. I think there's going to be a move for a viable third party, viable independent movement. I think a lot's coming. I just don't think it's coming till after this election. Quinn, do you think something like what you're hoping for might actually transpire?
Yeah, No Labels has been working at ballot.
They're going to help Trump. No Labels is going to help Trump.
I completely disagree with that. And I know some No Labels people there. Why would Joe Lieberman want to help Trump? That's insane.
He's confused because he's confused.
No.
Most of their money is Republican money, pro-Trump money. A lot of their money is. Go ahead.
No. I think it's a legitimate effort, and I think if they got the right candidate, they're not going to get Mark Warner of Virginia, but if they got a Mark Warner, if they got a Cassidy, if they got a Young is a very appealing guy.
Young, Indiana,
and he has refused to endorse Trump from a very Trumpy state. if they got somebody like that, and he, he would have to make an absolutely superb first impression, but the hunger is out there for somebody else, and there is money out there if somebody actually impresses the money people enough.
Well, and Quinn, this is where we disagree. I agree with you that the hunger is out there for something else. I, though, believe that the bigger, more pressing threat is we have an autocrat who has pledged to be a dictator in Trump. Our number one job is to stop him. You want no labels and all this other stuff? Fine. But after this election. After this election.
Okay, but the difference is two. The differences are two. Number one, we disagree on how bad Biden and Harris are. So I think they are, in different ways, at least as a combination, at least as bad as Trump. And I think Trump, as you know, I think Trump is the worst piece of human garbage, to quote that, ever to inhabit the Oval Office.
Quinn, that's why I just genuinely love and respect you, because I agree with what you say about Trump. And I find it fascinating that you would say Biden and Harris are like on the same level. Again, we disagree.
Way.
I find it fascinating.
In a different way. I mean, you got to remember, I'm a Reagan movement conservative. But I'm one that has worked with Democrats all my life, and and I can spout off a number of Democratic office holders that I like and respect, and we need more of that. We're not going to get more of that. Did you see Biden's speech? How divisive it was? It was outrageous. And Kamala Harris is worse. He's not trying to unite the country.
I did not like the speech. To me, it was just him yelling all the time. Clearly, they wanted to show he was up to the job. But yeah, no. Look, I don't. But see, Quinn, I don't blame Biden for being somewhat divisive, because I look at who he's running against, and every time Trump opens his mouth, he's trying to divide people. You can either just smile and say, "Oh, isn't that great?" or you can go after him. Biden's got to make a choice. Go ahead. I'll give you the final word on that.
He didn't just go after Trump. He went after every Republican, and rather than saying, okay, we've got somebody who's so divisive on the right, maybe I'll try to go and offer something, an appeal to all those sort of Republican leaners that don't like Trump, or to moderates that haven't been convinced by me, and offer some olive branches and offer a tone that would attract people to him. All he did is, both in style he yelled, and in substance it was far left and accusatory, not just of Trump, but of everybody who disagrees with him.
It was I can't stand State of the Union addresses. I wish presidents mailed them in. It was a campaign speech. I agree with you. It was directly addressed to the Democratic base. Quinn, on no labels, it strikes me that they're having a real hard time finding a candidate, because it seems like most of these candidates realize, Joe Manchin and the others, that man, they're going to get hung with helping Trump get reelected. So I don't expect no labels to really even find a candidate. Do you?
I don't know. I mean, look, if Liz Cheney and no labels got together, I don't know what her polling is in a three-way race. If Liz Cheney got together with no labels, I would quit my job and go. Okay, I would right now crawl on broken glass to get her elected, if she did it. So, and she certainly has the profile. I don't know how much her constant carping against Trump has I don't know whether that has made her incapable of getting ordinary other Republican votes in a way that others might, but I would love to see the polling in a three-way race with Liz Cheney. And if she got in, she certainly has the big enough name and profile that she might be able to carry it off.
My hunch is that she's looked at a lot of the polling that shows if she got in, just like if a lot of us got in, it would end up helping Trump. And Liz has pledged to do whatever she can do to make sure Trump isn't reelected.
I know that.
Hey, Quinn, final question, and it moves beyond this discussion. And this has been fun. Thank you, man. You're wonderful. I'm a dark Irishman. I'm somewhat younger than you. I worry about where the country is. I'm generally bearish on America. This democratic experiment, are you generally bullish or bearish on the American experiment as you sit here today?
This is the worst I've ever been, and I'm 50-50. But
wow.
I am by nature an optimist. But that's also one reason why I think an independent candidacy can win, because I think that we can do better, and I'm an optimist. And I think that Madison and company, Roger Sherman, who, by the way, unsung founder, Roger Sherman, all these other guys, created such an ingenious system that it has survived some really bad series of presidents in the past. And it can do so in the future. Whether it can survive another 4 years of Trump or Biden and Harris, I think it's a little iffy. But I think if anything can, the American experiment can, because we're good people, and the Constitution is such a good Constitution.
I think, my friend, my good conservative movement friend, I think you're going to get an independent president, and you're going to get another party, and you're going to get a bunch of good stuff happening. I just think it's going to happen after this election. Quin Hillyer, everybody. Follow him on Twitter, at Quin Hillyer. That's with one N, at QuinHillyer. WashingtonExaminer.com, WashingtonExaminer.com. Look for his stuff there. Quinn, this has been fun. Thank you, my friend.
Joe, thank you so much, and thank you for, except for trashing people that don't agree with you about how bad Biden is, or about the possibility of a third party. You are a voice of reason out there, and I really appreciate it. I love seeing what you do in your podcast and on Twitter, and please keep it up.
Well, I will, Quinn. And by the way, thank you, because when I did go on one of my screeds a week or two ago, you very respectfully got in my face, and I appreciated that, which led to this conversation. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.